Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kirsten with Daily Devotions of Inner Beauty. And I want to get back today into our study on Proverbs. We left off a month ago, maybe more, on Proverbs 4, I believe, and it was talking about wisdom and getting wisdom at all costs. Well, we're moving on today to chapter 5. This will be a really brief discussion. Me discussing to you. Wish I could have feedback, but that's the way YouTube is. So I'd like to just have you read Proverbs 5 on your own time. But I want to pull out a few verses that kind of summarize the chapter. And after I read the chapter, I discovered that chapter 5, verse 8, which I have here on a cue card, kind of summed it up. So let me go ahead and read that and maybe a couple more verses to you, and we will take it from there. So chapter 5, verse 8 says, "Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house." With that, chapter 5 is talking more about adultery. It's adultery in marriage. And whether it's the man, the husband who has an affair on the wife, or vice versa. It's a betrayal. So basically, this is what this chapter is talking about, is to flee, to stay away from adultery, from the adulterous woman. And although it is depicting a woman in the chapter, it could be a man too. So you can put male or female in this. Verse 15 and 16 says, "Drink water from your own well, never to be shared with strangers." That means stay with your wife, stay with your husband, keep to them. Don't share yourself with strangers, because when you share yourself with a stranger, you come back to your husband, and it's like the three of you have shared a bond. It's weird how that works like that, but when you do have sexual intimacy with somebody other than your husband, you are giving yourself to another man or woman. And then when you go back to your husband, you are sharing that experience in a way, an emotional experience. I guess it's really hard to explain, but you're taking that into your marriage bed. It has very devastating effects to have an affair. It ruins your character, your reputation, and of course could inevitably ruin your marriage. Even if you don't end up divorced, it's the whole trust issue. It makes it hard to trust your spouse after you have found out, the infidelity. Not only does it ruin your character and reputation, but it is against God's standards. He has designed sex to be in a marriage only for your protection, for your emotional protection, for your physical protection. It's his standard, and we need to abide by it. There are so many people in this world that use sex as to fill a void in their life. It might feel good emotionally at first, especially for women, to be able to have a man that shows interest in them, and they go and have this affair. But that doesn't last long. It's brief, and that's what Satan does. Is he likes to come in and tease and say, "Hey, look what you can have if you do this. This man admires you. If he finds you attractive, he's giving you the emotional connection that you desire from your husband. This is no big deal. This is going to make you feel better about yourself and who you are, and it'll fill that void." Well, that's what Satan tells you. But that void that you have, that you are trying to fill, is not going to be filled with a sexual relationship with another man. It's God that needs to fill that void. And it's hard for people to understand that, Christians and non-Christians. But that is what you're crying out for. And I say I'm talking women, having the affair, but it could be the man as well. The consequences are devastating after having an affair. And I want to read verses 11 through 14, just to kind of talk to you about the consequences that can and more than likely will happen if you do have an affair. It says in verse 11, "At the end of your life you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. You will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors, and I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. Is it worth it? Is it really worth to fill that void right then? Because that void will be filled at that moment, but what happens tomorrow when you need it filled? And when do you stop? When does it stop? So just keep that in mind. Relationship between husband and wife are sacred, and they need to be kept, sacred. And the intimacy needs to be between the husband and wife only. That is how you have a blessed marriage. Don't add risk to your relationship with your husband or wife. That's basically what chapter 5 is talking about. And I also want to talk a little bit about the adultery with this kind of can be an adultery with God. Our relationship with God needs to be sacred. We can share God with others. I don't mean that. But when we put other things above God, we are committing spiritual adultery. So if you kind of put it in that perspective, maybe your husband hasn't had an affair, or you haven't, or this is something that is far from what you struggle with. Do you struggle with spiritual adultery? How are you at putting money before God, putting your family before God, your husband even before God? It's not going to work. The same thing. You'll have this void that needs to be constantly filled. So keep that in mind. Put God first. Don't be the adulterer on him and the relationship you have with him. First comes God, second your husband, and then your family, and then job and everything else. Get your priorities straight and focus on the one you're with, because that's where the blessings come. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.